Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And today our question comes to us from Mystic Mark. And Mystic Mark begins his question by prefacing that he's talking about a situation in which a person has a background in Wicca, but wishes to reinvent themselves in a Wiccan context. And he goes on to say that he is completing his ordination with an organization other than my own, and that he is planning to take a year and a day to study, to let Spirit guide him, but then, when he has completed all of this, he wants to reestablish this particular tradition in his area, where from the sound of it, it had formerly flourished, but for some reason is not now. And he would like to know what I would think would be the most important consideration to deal with within this scenario. And what I would like you to do is to take a moment and think about what you would consider the most important thing to be conscious of in this scenario. And then I'll tell you what I think the most important thing to be conscious of in this scenario is. And I suspect I'll be the only one to give the answer I'm going to give. My answer is that the thing to be aware of are the practicalities of the situation. Both in your personal study and in how you apply it in trying to bring this tradition back to this area, always have your eye on what works and what doesn't, on what serves you and what doesn't, on what is constructive and what is not constructive, and on other kinds of practicality as well. Very often people forget all the practical considerations when they're doing these things and find themselves in a mess at the end because they've not considered the things that really needed considering. For example, if you're going to run a temple, do not also run yourself into bankruptcy. That really is not a sensible way to run a temple. If you're going to run a temple, do not create a situation where everybody else is simply bossing you around while you're doing all the work. I've seen that happen many times too, because people did not want to have a hierarchical organization, which in the end often meant that they had no control over their own group. So think about the practicalities of the situation you're creating, especially if you are in fact the one creating it, and make sure that it is a practical, sensible situation that isn't causing you to be in a bad situation. And this is true not only in that physical sense of working in your area to resurrect this tradition, but also in your personal spirituality. And you know, I've often quoted Sun Bear in his saying that my cousin Lady Crystal loves, that if it doesn't grow corn, you probably ought not to do it. Meaning, if it's not a practical thing, if it does not have some kind of good outcome for you, don't do it just because somebody else thinks you should. Make sure it's actually bearing fruit, and make sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. This is what I mean by practicalities. And for heaven's sake, don't just stick to it because someone says to stick to it if you cannot see the benefit of it. Now, I will grant you, if you're studying under someone, if you're working within a system, then you need to follow what that person says or work with that system. So I'm not saying don't do that. But Mark has specified that isn't quite the situation once he has obtained his ordination, that he will be the one reintroducing this. And so, in the end, he holds the bottom line. And whatever happens, good or bad, he won't really be able to blame on anyone but himself, so he'd best be sure that he makes good, solid, practical decisions. And I don't say this to in any way discourage Mystic Mark. Rather, on the contrary, by making good, solid, practical decisions, you can have a really good outcome. But don't let yourself be run over. Don't do things that don't make sense, but rather make sure that everything you're doing is a sensible, solid thing, and you'll come out the better for it. So those would be my thoughts on the matter. I hope you find them interesting, and until next time, may you blessed be. Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you for Pagans Tonight Radio. Pagans Tonight Radio is an online radio network with different hosts and different shows 7 nights a week. There's something for every taste, including Spanish language programming on Saturday evening. Check out paganstonight.com today.